Grant, please. I can explain everything, but right now I just need you to come. It's urgent.
Grant Wellington gazed out from the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, the city lights of New York City twinkling against the midnight sky. As a millionaire businessman in his late 40s, Grant had every luxury at his fingertips. A successful company, a luxurious home overlooking Central Park, and a life of privilege in the city that never sleeps. Yet, in the quiet of his Upper East Side apartment, he felt an unmistakable emptiness. The success and wealth that surrounded him were a cold comfort in the absence of something far more precious that he had lost long ago. He loosened his silk tie and sank into a leather armchair, nursing a glass of sparkling water with a slice of lemon. On the surface, Grant appeared to have it all together. His salt and pepper hair and tailored suit exuded confidence and authority. But tonight, his mind wandered to the past he rarely spoke about. He kept a single photograph tucked in the top drawer of his desk, a candid shot from nearly 2 decades ago of him and a beautiful, warm-eyed woman laughing in the summer sun. Ayanna. The name echoed softly in his mind as he closed his eyes, recalling the way her smile could light up even the darkest corners of his heart. Ayanna had been his wife, his first and only love. They were young when they married. He, an ambitious white entrepreneur building his empire, and she, a compassionate black social worker with a heart of gold. Their love had once bridged worlds, defying the expectations of Grant's aristocratic family and the skepticism of some of Grant's elite peers. He remembered her vibrant spirit and how she used to tease him into abandoning his work for a spontaneous midnight stroll through the city. But those memories were tainted by the pain of their breakup. 19 years had passed since the divorce, yet Grant could still feel the sting of regret, like a phantom ache for a missing limb. He rarely allowed himself to dwell on Ayanna or the bitter end of their marriage. Work had been his escape. He immersed himself in Wellington Ventures, the investment firm he grew into an empire. The years since had been a blur of board meetings, business deals, and charity galas. Publicly, he was the Grant Wellington, a man admired and envied, known for his philanthropy and sharp business acumen. Privately, however, he led a solitary life. The penthouse felt empty after the hush of his staff leaving for the night. There was no laughter, no warmth of family waiting for him. Only the soft hum of the central air and the distant sound of traffic below. Grant stood and wandered to his desk, drawn by the old photograph, calling to him like a beacon. He opened the drawer and gently picked up the framed picture. Ayanna's face smiled back at him, deep brown eyes full of life, her ebony skin glowing in the sunlight of that day. In the photo, she leaned into Grant's side, her head against his shoulder. And he looked down at her with an expression of pure adoration. How did it all go so wrong? He wondered for the 1000th time, his chest tightening. They had been happy once, dreaming of a future together despite the challenges. Yet all of it had crumbled under the weight of misunderstandings and hurt. As he traced a thumb over Ayanna's face in the picture, Grant felt a wave of loneliness. He had convinced himself he could live with his choices, that trading his love for success was a necessary sacrifice. But now, nearing 50 and alone, he wasn't so sure. He sighed and set the photograph back, face down, as if he could put the memories to rest again. Just as he closed the drawer, the ringing of his phone shattered the silence of the penthouse. Grant frowned. It was unusual to receive calls at this hour, unless it was an emergency at work. He swiftly crossed the room to where his cell phone vibrated on the marble kitchen counter. The caller ID showed an unknown number. Normally he would ignore unidentified calls, but an inexplicable urge made him answer this time. "Hello? Grant Wellington speaking," he answered in a polite but guarded tone. For a moment, there was silence except for a faint background noise, as if the caller was in a busy place. Then a hesitant female voice spoke, and with the first word, Grant felt the ground tilt beneath him. "Grant?" The woman's voice was trembling and achingly familiar. "It's me, Ayanna." Grant's breath caught in his throat. He nearly dropped the phone as a surge of emotion, shock, disbelief, a jolt of something old and powerful, crashed over him. He gripped the counter's edge to steady himself. He wondered for a second if he had fallen asleep in his chair, and this was a dream conjured by his lonely heart. But the voice was real, and it spoke again, this time more urgently. "Grant, I'm sorry to call so late," Ayanna said, her voice strained with anxiety. I wouldn't disturb you if it wasn't important. I need your help. Please." Grant's heart pounded in his chest. He hadn't heard from Ayanna since the divorce was finalized 19 years ago. Not a word. And now, here she was, calling out of the blue in the dead of night, saying she needed help. A dozen questions collided in his mind. Why now? What could have happened? But the only word he managed to utter was her name, half whispered in astonishment. Ayanna. He breathed, as if saying it louder might scare her away. "Is it really you?" "Yes," she replied, and he could hear the tears she was holding back. "Grant, I don't know who else to turn to. It's about—" Her voice choked, and Grant's stomach knotted in fear. "It's about our—" Before she could finish, Grant heard another sound in the background. Over the phone, a muffled male voice calling out, "Mom, are you okay? Who are you calling?" The voice was young, maybe a teenager or in his early 20s, and it sounded concerned. "Mom?" Grant's mind stumbled over that word. In a split second, confusion and a strange spark of hope flared within him. Ayanna has a child, he thought, stunned. She's a mother. He had known nothing about her life after him, whether she'd remarried or started a family. Hearing someone call her mom hit him unexpectedly. Ayanna's voice came back, hurried and apologetic. "Grant, please, I can explain everything, but right now I just need you to come. It's urgent. I'm at St. Catherine's Hospital in Manhattan. I wouldn't ask if it weren't life or death." His mouth went dry at those words. Hospital, life or death. The desperation in her tone cut straight through any hesitation. Despite the whirlwind of questions and emotions raging inside him, Grant found himself already, moving, snatching his suit jacket from the back of a chair and grabbing his car keys. "I'll be right there," he answered at once, his voice firm even as his hand trembled. "Tell me what happened. Who's in the hospital?" There was a shaky exhale of relief on the other end. "It's my son, our son, Grant. His name is Omari. He's very hurt." Ayanna's voice broke on the words. Grant's keys slipped from his hand and clattered onto the tile floor. He stood frozen, barely registering the sting of tears in his own eyes. Our son. The two words thundered in his ears. His mind tried to catch up. Ayanna had a son, and she said our son. That could only mean one thing. The boy was his child as well. Grant felt as though the world had flipped upside down in an instant. Ayanna was still speaking, her voice tight with urgency and fear. "He was in an accident, a car accident. They say he's lost a lot of blood. He's in surgery and needs a transfusion. Omari's blood type is rare, and the hospital is running low. They asked if any family could donate." "He's O negative, Grant." She paused, her breath hitching. "I'm O positive. His twin brother is O positive and can't help. I didn't know who else to call but you. You're likely a match and—" "Twin brother?" Grant managed to stammer, his head spinning. He clutched the phone tightly. This was almost too much to process. Not one, but two sons? His throat worked as he tried to form words. "Ayanna, I have twin sons." His voice was hushed, filled with shock and a dawning realization that nearly buckled his knees. On the other end, Ayanna let out a soft, tearful, "Yes. Twins. 2 boys. I'm so sorry you're finding out like this." She swallowed hard and continued, "Grant, please. Omari doesn't have much time. The doctors need a donor immediately, and you're the only person I can ask." Grant didn't hesitate any longer. A fierce protectiveness he didn't know he was capable of surged inside him, and everything else became secondary. "I'm on my way," he said firmly. "Hang on, Ayanna. I'll be there as fast as I can." He ended the call, heart hammering, and snatched his keys off the floor with shaking hands. In the span of a few minutes, Grant's entire world had been upended. Ayana's frantic phone call had not only dropped the revelation that he had 2 sons he never knew about, but also that one of them was in grave danger. As he bolted out the door of his penthouse and into the private elevator, Grant's mind raced. Fear for the son he had yet to meet coursed through his veins alongside disbelief and anger and hope. Questions would have to wait. Right now, nothing mattered except reaching that hospital and doing whatever he could to save his child's life. Before we continue with Grant's emotional reunion, if you're invested in this story of second chances and family reconciliation, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We bring you powerful stories about love, forgiveness, and the bonds that can never truly be broken, no matter how much time has passed. And here's a question for you. Do you think Ayana was right to keep the twins a secret from Grant for 19 years, or should she have told him despite the pain and his family's threats? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm reading every single one. Now, let's get back to the hospital, where Grant is about to meet his sons for the very first time. The city streets were nearly empty at this late hour, and Grant made it to St. Catherine's Hospital in record time. He barely remembered the drive. His mind was singularly fixed on reaching Ayana and the sons he never knew he had. When he arrived, Grant parked haphazardly near the ER entrance, not caring about the no parking sign or the curious look from a security guard. He sprinted through the sliding glass doors, his heart hammering from more than just the run. Inside, the harsh fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic overwhelmed his senses. Grant's eyes scanned the emergency waiting area frantically until they landed on a figure across the room. Ayana stood up from a plastic chair the instant she saw him. For a moment, neither of them moved. Grant's breath caught in his chest as he took her in. After all these years, she was still unmistakably Ayana. Her braided hair was longer now, and there were a few more lines around her eyes, but she was as beautiful as he remembered, if not more. Yet tonight, that beauty was strained with worry. Her eyes were red-rimmed from tears, and she was wringing her hands anxiously. A wave of emotion rolled through Grant, relief at seeing her, shock at confronting her after so long, and fear for the son fighting for his life upstairs. He crossed the room in a few swift strides. "Ayana," he said, voice soft with concern and decades of unspoken feelings. Ayana's eyes filled anew with tears at the sight of him. In that charged moment, it was as if the intervening years had momentarily fallen away. They stood face to face for the first time since their youth, haunted by the ghosts of the past and uncertainty of the present. Then Ayana seemed to remember why they were there. She wiped her eyes quickly and spoke, her tone urgent. "Thank you for coming so quickly, Grant. Her voice faltered, glancing towards a set of double doors labeled surgery down the hall. "Omari is still in surgery. The doctors need the blood as soon as possible. Did they talk to you?" Only now did Grant notice a nurse standing nearby with a clipboard, looking expectantly at him. He must have been the only middle-aged man in a three-piece suit racing into the ER that night, clearly out of place. Grant nodded to the nurse, already rolling up his sleeve. "I'm the donor. O negative. Take as much as you need, please." His words rushed out. The nurse guided him briskly toward a side room to draw blood. Before he followed the nurse, Grant turned back to Ayana, who stood twisting her fingers anxiously. Impulsively, he reached out and squeezed her hand. "He's going to be okay," Grant said with a determination he wasn't entirely sure he felt, but he needed to reassure her. "Our son will be okay. I promise." Ayana bit her lip and nodded, holding onto his hand for a second longer than necessary. In her eyes, Grant saw gratitude and overwhelming fear. "He's in critical condition," she whispered, voice shaking. "Internal injuries. They said the blood could make the difference." "Thank you, Grant." Grant gave her hand a final squeeze and then followed the nurse. In a small adjoining room, he hurried through the paperwork with trembling hands, barely reading the consent forms for the blood transfusion. His mind was solely on Omari, his son, his flesh and blood, lying somewhere beyond those surgery doors. Soon enough, he was seated as the nurse found a vein in his arm. As the blood began to flow through the tube, Grant forced himself to take slow breaths. He had to stay calm and focused. Dizziness from blood loss was creeping up on him, but he pushed it aside with sheer willpower. If ever there was a time he needed to be strong, it was now. While the nurse worked efficiently, Grant's thoughts raced. He had twin sons, one of whom was in surgery fighting for his life. The other twin, Ayana had said, was named Dante? Yes, she mentioned a twin brother. Where was he? The voice on the phone asking Mom, "Who are you calling?" must have been the other son. Perhaps Dante was somewhere in the hospital, waiting for news. Grant's heart twisted, imagining what the young man must be feeling, watching his brother in peril. My sons, he thought in wonder and anguish. He hadn't been there for them all these years. Now, in their darkest hour, he'd appeared as a stranger. After what felt like both an eternity and an instant, the nurse finished drawing blood. A pint that would go directly into Omari's veins to give him strength to pull through. Grant felt a touch light-headed as he stood up. He steadied himself on the edge of the cot. "Sir, take it easy," the nurse cautioned, placing a bandage on his arm. "You should sit for a moment. You lost a lot of blood just now." "I'm fine," Grant insisted quietly. He had endured far worse discomforts in life, and adrenaline still coursed through him. "Please, just make sure my son gets what he needs." The nurse gave a sympathetic nod. "They've already taken it to the OR. The doctor will update you as soon as possible." Grant thanked her and stepped back into the hallway, a slight unsteadiness in his steps. Almost immediately, he spotted Ayana and a young man standing with her. The youth was tall and lean, with a rich brown complexion like his mother's and a tense posture. He looked about 18 or 19, clad in a wrinkled hoodie and jeans, face drawn with worry. Grant realized in a jolt of recognition that this must be Dante, his other son. Dante's eyes were fixed warily on Grant as he approached. They were dark, guarded eyes. Ayana's eyes, studying him from beneath a furrowed brow. Grant could see a mixture of confusion and resentment on the young man's face. He wondered what Ayana had told Dante about him over the years. Considering Dante's hardened expression, it likely wasn't a flattering picture. Ayana stepped forward, introducing them softly. "Grant, this is Dante, our other son." Her voice was gentle, as if she were unsure how either of them would react. "Dante, this is your father." He came to help Omari. Hearing her call him your father made Grant's heart ache. He felt an overwhelming urge to hug this boy, nearly a grown man, but one. Look at Dante's stiff posture and clenched jaw kept him rooted in place. Grant managed a tentative smile. "Hi, Dante," he said, voice low and rough with emotion. I'm sorry we have to meet for the first time under these circumstances. How is your brother doing?" Dante's jaw worked, and for a moment Grant thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, the young man spoke, his tone cold and clipped. "They haven't told us anything new yet. He's still in surgery." Dante's eyes flicked to the white bandage on Grant's arm where blood had just been drawn. Was it enough?" he asked, but there was an edge to his voice that wasn't just worry. It was accusation, as if challenging Grant's right to be here at all. Grant nodded gently. "They took what they needed. I'm O-negative, a universal donor. It should help." He studied Dante's face, desperate to find a connection. The youth had Ayana's high cheekbones and expressive eyes, but there was something of Grant in him too, perhaps in the shape of his chin or the determined set of his brow. It was surreal, standing before his son after 19 years of absence. Guilt and regret swelled within Grant. He wanted to explain himself somehow, but this wasn't the time or place. Instead, he said earnestly, "Your mom told me what happened. I'm so sorry about Omari's accident. I'm here for you both, for all of you." Dante's eyes flashed and he crossed his arms. "Here for us?" he echoed with open skepticism. "Funny, you're here now. Where were you for the last 19 years? "Dante," Ayana interjected, in a hushed warning tone, reaching to touch her son's arm. She looked around. A few other worried families in the waiting area were glancing at them. The last thing they needed was a confrontation in the middle of the hospital. "Sweetheart," Not now. We need to focus on Omari. Your brother needs us to be strong and united for him. Dante pressed his lips together, and for a second, Grant saw the raw hurt in his son's eyes. For him, Dante muttered, shaking off his mother's hand gently. Everything's always for Omari. With that pained statement, the teenager sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Grant realized that Dante was not only angry at him, but also terrified of losing his twin. The stress of the situation was wearing on him. Unsure what to do, Grant remained standing nearby. Ayana gave Grant an apologetic glance, then sat beside Dante, putting an arm around his shoulders. "Omari will pull through, Dante," she whispered softly to her son, though loud enough that Grant could hear too. "He's a fighter, just like you. We have to believe he'll be okay." Dante didn't lift his face, but he leaned into his mother's embrace, allowing her comfort. Over his head, Ayana looked up at Grant. Her eyes held a storm of emotions, sorrow, exhaustion, and a flicker of the old anger that lingered between them. Yet, she also looked grateful that he was there. She mouthed silently, "Thank you," and he nodded. They fell into a tense silence after that, united by worry but divided by years of estrangement and unanswered questions. Grant lowered himself into a seat across from Ayana and Dante. He felt the weight of everything unspoken pressing down on him. How he longed to ask the questions burning in his heart. Why didn't you tell me about them? How could you keep my sons from me? And also to answer Dante's pointed question, where was I for 19 years? But right now, as Ayana had said, Omari was the priority. Time crawled by under the bright lights of the hospital corridor. Ayana periodically checked her phone or spoke in hushed tones with Dante. Grant remained close, offering quiet support. A cup of water for Ayana, a blanket fetched from a nurse for Dante, who was shivering in his thin hoodie. It was awkward. He didn't know if these small gestures were welcome, but he tried anyway. Sometimes Ayana would offer a polite nod of thanks. Dante mostly avoided eye contact. As the first pale light of dawn crept into the sky outside, the surgeon finally emerged from the double doors. All three of them jumped to their feet. Grant's heart thudded. The doctor looked tired, but gave a reassuring smile. "Omari James is out of surgery and in stable condition," he announced. Ayana nearly collapsed with relief, tears of gratitude spilling down her cheeks. "Oh, thank God," she cried softly. Grant instinctively moved to steady her, placing a hand at her back as she wiped her face. "The internal bleeding was severe, but we managed to repair the damage," the surgeon continued. "He lost a lot of blood, but the transfusion helped immensely. Whoever donated likely saved his life." The doctor's eyes flickered to the bandage on Grant's arm, and then to the way Grant hovered protectively by Ayana's side. Recognition dawned on the surgeon's face that Grant was the father, but he simply extended a hand to shake. "Thank you, Mr. Wellington. Omari will need some time to recover, but we expect he'll make a full recovery." Grant exhaled a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He shook the doctor's hand firmly, emotion thick in his throat. "Thank you, doctor. Can we see him?" "He's in recovery now, still unconscious," the surgeon replied. "Family can see him very briefly, one at a time for now. He'll be moved to the ICU shortly. Only immediate family is allowed." The word family hung in the air. Ayana nodded quickly. "Of course. Thank you so much." Dante was practically bouncing on his feet with anxious energy. "I want to see him," he said immediately, wiping at his eyes with his sleeve, trying to hide how red they were. "Go ahead, Dante," Ayana said gently, touching his arm. "We'll be right here when you come out. Give him our love, okay?" Dante hurried after the doctor through the swinging doors to see his twin. That left Grant and Ayana momentarily alone in the hallway. The silence between them was heavy with things they could not yet say. Ayana took a shaky breath and turned to Grant. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with heartfelt sincerity. "You saved his life. I can't ever repay you for that." Grant shook his head, stepping closer. "Ayana, please, you don't owe me thanks. I only did what any father would do. He hesitated, emotion threatening to overwhelm him now that the immediate crisis had passed. His eyes searched hers, pained and confused. In a raw whisper he asked, "Why, Ayana? Why didn't you tell me? All these years. I never knew I had sons." Tears welled in her eyes again, and she looked away, shame and hurt crossing her face. "Grant, this isn't the time," she murmured, her voice tight. "Omari needs us. Dante needs us. We're all exhausted." He realized he was pushing too soon. Ayana had dark circles under her eyes, and she looked drained from the night's events. Grant himself swayed a little, fatigue and the after-effects of blood loss catching up to him. He pinched the bridge of his nose, nodding. "You're right. I'm sorry. We'll talk later. But I do want to know when you're ready to tell me." "I know," she said softly. She finally met his gaze, and he saw the conflict there, old pain and anger, mingled with a tentative gratitude and maybe even relief that he was here now. "I promise I'll explain, Grant. Just not here, not yet." He accepted that for now. They had to focus on their sons. Grant glanced at the doors Dante had gone through. "Ayana, how?" he began, uncertain. "How should we handle this for the boys? Do they know anything about me? About why I wasn't around?" Ayana pressed her lips together. "They know that you and I divorced before they were born," she said quietly. "I told them we had a complicated situation. I never went into all the details. They don't know everything. Dante, especially, has always been angry at the idea of you." Her voice trembled. "He thinks you chose to abandon us." Grant's face fell. The thought of his sons growing up believing he had willfully abandoned them cut him deeply. "And Omari?" he asked hoarsely. Omari was always more curious than angry. "He wanted to know about you, even if I avoided the topic. I tried to keep my bitterness out of it when they were little." She sighed. "I honestly didn't know how to explain. I thought it might hurt them less to not know everything." Grant gently reached out and, finding courage, took Ayana's hand. She allowed it, her fingers cold in his warm grasp. "We'll figure it out," he said quietly. "For now, let's just be there for them. We have time to sort out the rest, but they come first." Ayana nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Okay." Just then, the doors opened and Dante stepped out, looking relieved, but still emotional. Grant released Ayana's hand before Dante could notice their closeness. Dante gave them a quick update. "He's still out, but he looks okay. Tubes and all that, but he's alive. They said he'll wake up in a few hours." Ayana moved to hug Dante, and he leaned into his mother's embrace, some of the tension leaving his body now that his twin was safe. Grant stood a respectful distance away, feeling a pang of longing to be part of that hug, to comfort his son as well. Instead, he offered a tentative smile. "That's wonderful news. Omari's a tough young man." Dante nodded, pulling back from his mom. His eyes flickered to Grant, expression still guarded though less hostile than before. "Yeah, he is." There was an awkward pause. Dante shifted on his feet, then mumbled, "They said only one visitor at a time, so maybe Mom should go in now." Ayana glanced between her son and Grant. "I'll go sit with him a bit," she said, and then to Grant she added kindly, "You should get some rest. You still look pale." "I'm fine," Grant assured, but in truth, exhaustion was weighing on him heavily now that adrenaline ebbed. Still, he wasn't about to leave. "I'll wait. I'd like to see him when I can, if that's all right." He directed the last part to Dante as much as to Ayana. Dante just shrugged, not meeting his eyes. "He's your son," he said, the words almost challenging despite their truth. "Do what you want." Ayana shot her son a cautioning look before gently saying to Grant, "Of course you can see him. We'll both wait here after I'm done." Grant nodded, grateful. He watched Ayana disappear into the recovery room to be with Omari. Then he found himself alone with Dante. Father and son stood a few feet apart in the corridor, a gulf of 19 years between them. Grant cleared his throat softly. "Dante, I know this is a lot. I'm sure you have questions, and you have every right to be upset with me. I wish I could have been there for you and your brother." The young man stared at the floor, arms wrapped around himself. He didn't respond for a long moment. Finally, Dante muttered, "It doesn't matter now. We got by without you." But his voice lacked conviction, as though he wasn't sure whether to lash out or to ask for something, perhaps an explanation or reassurance. Grant ran a hand through his hair, unsure how to break through the wall Dante had built. "Your mother said, you grew up thinking I left you on purpose," he said gently. "I want you to know that's not true. I didn't know about you. If I had..." Dante's eyes snapped up to meet Grant's, anger flaring. "If you had known, what? You wouldn't have left? You wouldn't have signed those divorce papers? Because Mom cried herself to sleep for years over what you did. If you cared at all, you would have tried to find out, or at least come back." The quiet, bitter words struck like a blow. Grant felt them in his core. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice thick. "I thought... She never told me. I didn't know how to find her." "She didn't want to be found," Dante said sharply, then clamped his mouth shut. He looked away, jaw tight. "Forget it. This isn't the time." Grant realized pushing further might backfire. Dante was clearly conflicted. The relief of Omari's safety was battling with the hurt and anger he'd nursed his whole life. So Grant nodded softly. "You're right. We'll talk later. Just don't ever think that I didn't care about you or your brother, all right? I didn't know. But I'm here now." Dante didn't answer, but the hard set of his shoulders seemed to ease by a fraction. They lapsed into silence once more. It was an uneasy peace, but it was a start. A short while later, Ayanna returned, looking marginally more at ease after seeing Omari. She and Grant convinced Dante to go home to shower and rest for a bit, as he'd been at the hospital all night. Dante resisted at first, but finally agreed when Ayanna promised she'd call if there was any change. Grant offered to have his driver take Dante home, but Dante refused, saying he could manage. After a last concerned look at his recovering brother, the young man left, leaving Grant and Ayanna alone again. Now morning light streamed through the hospital windows. Grant and Ayanna sat side by side in the small waiting area outside the ICU, where Omari would soon be moved. Both cradled paper cups of coffee that had long gone cold. Fatigue settled over them, but the space between them hummed with unspoken words. "Dante will come around," Ayanna said softly, breaking the silence. She gave a weak smile. "He's protective of his family. He's a good boy. Just hurt." "I can see that," Grant replied, staring down at his cup. "They both seem like great kids, Ayanna. You've raised them well." There was admiration and sadness in his tone. She had done it all alone, and done it wonderfully. Ayanna shook her head slowly. "I did my best. But they deserve to have their father in their life too." She sighed, closing her eyes for a moment. "I never wanted them to feel abandoned. I tried to be both mother and father, you know. But I couldn't give them everything." Grant turned to face her, guilt pressing on him. "I wish I had known. I would have been there in a heartbeat. I hope one day they'll believe that." "They will," she said, meeting his gaze. There was sincerity there. "I'll make sure they know the full truth. I owe them that. And I owe you an explanation too." Grant's throat tightened. The full truth. This was the moment he had been both dreading and longing for. Why had she kept his children secret? What had really happened back then? The questions were right on the tip of his tongue. But before he could ask, a nurse came to inform them that Omari was being transferred to the ICU and they could briefly see him once he was settled. The conversation would have to wait just a little longer. And so Grant nodded to Ayanna, accepting that after 19 years of waiting, a few more hours for answers was bearable. Together, they went to see their son, silently bracing for the next steps, both in Omari's recovery and in the overdue reckoning of their own shared past. Later that afternoon, with Omari resting safely in the ICU and Dante back by his brother's side, Grant and Ayanna found a quiet moment to slip away for a much-needed conversation. They wandered down to a small hospital courtyard garden where a few benches sat beneath a blossoming dogwood tree. The spring air was cool and refreshing after the stuffy hospital. Corridors. For a while they sat in silence on a wooden bench, gathering the courage. to reopen wounds that had been left untended for 19 long years. Ayana clasped her hands in her lap, studying the pattern of cracks in the pavement at her feet. Grant watched her gently, noting how the midday sun highlighted strands of silver in her dark braids. She was still so beautiful to him, but there was a heaviness in her posture that hadn't been there in her youth. Finally, he quietly broke the silence. "Ayana," he said, "I know this isn't easy, but please, help me understand. What happened back then? Why did it all fall apart?" His voice was low and earnest. "I know I'm as much to blame, but there are things I realized I never truly understood. And about the twins, why didn't you tell me? I deserved to know, and they deserved their father." His words were not accusatory, they were filled with pain and regret. Ayana drew a shaky breath and nodded. "You're right," she whispered. "They did deserve their father. And you deserve to know." She turned her body slightly to face him. "I never meant to hurt them, or you. I thought I was doing the right thing at the time. Maybe it was the wrong choice. I've second-guessed it every day of my life." Grant's throat tightened. Hearing her acknowledge that he should have known gave him a small measure of validation, but it didn't ease the ache of lost years. "Start at the beginning," he gently encouraged. "What did I get so wrong that night, Ayana? I remember bits and pieces, but I need to hear it from you." Ayana closed her eyes, gathering her memories. When she opened them again, they glistened with tears and distant hurt. "It started with the pressure to have a child," she began softly. "Do you recall how your family was constantly asking when we'd give them an heir? You were their only son, and they made me feel like I was failing for not getting pregnant within the first year of our marriage." Grant nodded slowly, guilt washing over him. He remembered all too well the subtle and not so subtle remarks from his mother about wanting grandchildren, about continuing the Wellington legacy. "I remember," he said. "It put a lot of stress on us, on you, and I'm sorry I let their pressure seep into our marriage. We should have handled it together." Ayana offered a sad smile. "We were both under pressure. I wanted a baby too, you know. I dreamed of a family with you. But when it didn't happen right away, I saw how anxious you became. You started working even longer hours, and when you were home, you were distant. It was like you were trying to avoid thinking about it." He had been. Grant swallowed, recalling those days. The truth was, he had felt a growing fear that perhaps something was wrong, with her or with him, and his parents' implicit blame on Ayana, with comments about maybe she's not fit to bear your children or other such cruel insinuations, had poisoned his mind. "I was afraid," he admitted, "afraid that we'd never have a child, and I foolishly listened to others more than I listened to you." Ayana blinked back tears as she continued. "About 2 years into our marriage, I decided to quietly see a doctor, a fertility specialist, just to make sure everything was okay. I didn't tell you, because I didn't want you to worry or feel pressured. I thought if there was a problem on my side, maybe I could fix it and surprise you with good news." She gave a bitter laugh. "In hindsight, I should have talked to you openly, but I was young and desperate to make things right on my own." Grant listened intently, guilt twisting in his gut. He vaguely remembered that time. He had been busy with a major business deal, often away on trips. He hadn't noticed her secret visits to a doctor. "One afternoon," Ayana went on, "I went to see Dr. Evans, the specialist I mentioned. He had run some tests earlier that month, and that day he told me something that filled me with hope. I wasn't infertile. In fact, I was already pregnant, just a few weeks along." Her eyes lifted to meet Grant's, shining as she relived that moment. "I was so overjoyed, Grant. I couldn't believe it. After all the stress and praying, it finally happened. I was going to tell you that evening in a special way. I even bought a baby onesie that said, 'I love my daddy,' to surprise you." Her voice cracked and she looked down. "I never got the chance." Grant felt his heart pounding. He never knew any of this. Pregnant. She had been pregnant. He remembered coming home that evening, heart heavy with a discovery he had made that shattered him. Or so he thought. "That was the day he murmured, trailing off. Shame burned through him. "Go on." Ayana's fingers twisted together. When I left the clinic, I bumped into an old friend of mine on the way out. Marcus, my college friend. He had come to the hospital for an appointment as well, and saw me, with the little baby outfit in a bag. I told him the news because I was just so excited and couldn't hold it in. We were hugging in celebration right outside the clinic. She closed her eyes, as if pained by the memory. That's the moment you happened to drive up. Grant shut his eyes, recalling with crystal clarity that exact scene. It was seared into his memory. He'd finished a meeting nearby and was coming to pick her up for dinner. Instead, he saw Ayana in another man's arms holding a baby garment. He jumped to a terrible conclusion. I thought you were having an affair, he whispered, voice filled with remorse. I saw you with him, smiling and hugging, with that infant outfit in your hand. I convinced myself that you'd gotten pregnant by someone else. Ayana's lips trembled. When we got home that night, you were furious. I had never seen you look at me the way you did. You accused me of betraying you, of carrying another man's child. A tear spilled down her cheek. I tried to tell you the truth, Grant. I tried to explain that Marcus was just a friend, that the baby was yours. But you wouldn't listen. You were so hurt and angry. You said awful things. Grant felt a deep shame hearing this, even though he remembered his harsh words himself. He had been blinded by pain and pride. I was a fool, he croaked. I didn't give you a chance. I let my jealousy and my parents' doubts cloud my judgment. He reached out hesitantly and placed his hand over hers, which were cold and shaking. I'm sorry, Ayana. Sorry doesn't even begin to cover it. I destroyed our family with my lack of trust. Ayana didn't pull her hand away. She looked at their hands together as if steadying herself to continue. The next day, she said softly, you went to work early. Before you left, I begged you to talk, but you told me there was nothing to discuss, that you'd have your lawyer serve me papers. She inhaled sharply. I was 3 months pregnant at our divorce hearing. I showed up, hoping maybe you'd notice, or that I could find a moment to tell you. But you didn't even come in person. You let the lawyers handle everything. Grant's eyes widened in dismay. 3 months. By the hearing, he whispered. Their divorce had been finalized fast, within a couple months of that fight. I didn't go because I was too angry and cowardly to face you. I thought I'd just break down and forgive you if I saw you. And at the time, I still wrongly believed the baby wasn't mine. He shook his head in self-disgust. So I stayed away, thinking it was for the best. God, Ayana. I had no idea you were carrying our child. How could I? I refused to listen. His eyes grew moist. You were right there, and I wasn't there to see. She squeezed his hand now, surprising him. I almost told you anyway that day, she admitted. But your lawyers had already pushed a generous settlement agreement in front of me. Your family's doing, I'm sure. I was so hurt, Grant. The man I loved didn't trust me, didn't even bother to hear me out in person. I signed the papers, and I decided I would raise my baby alone. I left the courthouse feeling both heartbroken and fiercely protective of this tiny life inside me. I swore I'd never let anyone hurt my child the way I'd been hurt. A tear rolled down Grant's cheek now. So you moved away, he said, voice thick. You vanished. I tried to look for you once, a few months later when my anger cooled and I realized I might have been wrong. He swallowed hard. I went to your old apartment, but you were gone. I asked a mutual acquaintance, but they said you didn't want to talk to me. I didn't know you already had the babies by then. Ayana nodded. I moved to stay with a cousin upstate for a while. I gave birth to the twins alone, with just my cousin by my side. Her voice quavered, remembering that lonely time. They were born a few weeks early, but thankfully healthy. 2 beautiful boys, Grant. I named them Dante and Omari James. James after my father. Hearing the details of their birth made Grant ache with sorrow and joy at the same time. He could picture her in a hospital bed without him, holding 2 newborns. My sons, he thought, with a mix of pride and grief. I wish I could have been there, he whispered. You should never have had to go through that alone. A fresh tear slipped down Ayana's face. Those early years were hard. I used the divorce settlement money to make sure the boys had everything they needed. I went back to school to get a master's degree in counseling, all while raising 2 infants. I wanted to give them a good life, something stable, all on my own. She paused, then added quietly, and I was afraid. Afraid that if I told you or your family about them, you'd try to take them away from me. Grant looked at her sharply, horrified. Take them away? Ayanna, I would never. He stopped, thinking of his parents. His mother's harsh words from the past echoed in his mind. That woman is not fit to raise the next generation of Wellingtons. He grimaced. Did my family threaten you? Ayanna hesitated, but she had promised the full truth. Your mother came to see me a few months after our divorce, she confessed. She'd heard rumors that I was pregnant. I think maybe one of the house staff overheard something. She offered me money to disappear and never contact you again. Grant's free hand curled into a fist. What? My mother did that? His voice was taut with anger and disbelief. He knew his mother had interfered, but to that extent, why didn't you tell me? Ayanna gave him a sad, pointed look. Tell you when, Grant? After the divorce, you wouldn't see me or hear me, and when she approached me, I was 8 months pregnant, vulnerable and frightened. She warned that if I tried to go to you with the children, she would use the best lawyers money could buy to prove I was unfit and get full custody for you, effectively cutting me out of my own babies' lives. Grant felt sick. He knew his family's wealth and influence could indeed make legal battles ugly. I never would have allowed that, he said, pain in his voice. But I understand why you doubted. I hadn't exactly stood up to her before, had I? Ayanna brushed at her tears. I was desperate to protect my unborn sons. So I took your mother's deal. She transferred what, to me, was an enormous sum of money, and I agreed to keep the boys away from the Wellingtons. That's why I gave them my last name and never put your name on the birth certificate. I convinced myself they were better off with just me. Grant felt an immense weight of guilt and anger, guilt at his own failures and anger at his mother's meddling. He raised Ayanna's hand to his lips and pressed a trembling kiss to her knuckles, a gesture of regret and reverence. I'm so sorry, he choked out. You went through hell because of my family, because of me. If only I had trusted you back then, had stood by you against them, none of this would have happened. Ayanna's breath hitched at the gentle kiss on her hand, and she wiped a tear from his cheek with her other hand. I'm sorry too, Grant, she whispered. I should have fought harder to tell you, to let you be their father. I thought I was doing what was best at the time, but I robbed you and the boys of so many years together. Dante and Omari grew up without knowing their dad because of my choice. That guilt has weighed on me every day. He shook his head. You did what you thought was necessary to keep them safe and loved. I can't blame you for that. The fault was mine first for breaking us in the beginning. They gazed at each other, 2 pairs of eyes brimming with tears and decades of longing. Everything was in the open now. The misunderstandings, the lies, the fears. The burden of those old secrets seemed to lift, leaving them raw but finally able to truly see each other again. I never stopped loving you, you know, Grant confessed in a broken whisper. I tried to move on, but no one ever. They never held a candle to you. I kept that photo of us because it's all I had left. Ayanna let out a soft sob that she quickly stifled. I loved you too, Grant. I think a part of me always will. But after what happened, I didn't know how to trust you again. I poured all that love into raising our sons. She managed a trembling smile. They are amazing boys. You would be so proud of them. I already am, he said with a small smile of his own. Then, summoning courage, he added, I know it's too late to give them a childhood with their father, but I want to be here for them now, if you'll let me. I want to earn back your trust, Ayanna, and theirs. Ayanna looked down at their joined hands thoughtfully. Dante will be the tough one to win over, she said. He's always been more affected by the idea of you. He was the man of the house growing up, always trying to take care of me and Omari. He took it personally that you weren't there, even without knowing the details. Grant nodded. I noticed. He has a good heart, though. I saw how worried he was for Omari. He loves fiercely. I hope in time he'll see that I want to be here now, and that I truly care. He will, In time, Ayana agreed. And Omari, I think you'll find he's a lot like you. He's studying engineering, always tinkering and problem-solving. Dante is more like me, passionate and a bit headstrong. Hearing those snippets of who his sons were filled Grant with joy. He couldn't wait to discover it firsthand. I can't wait to know everything about them, he said, smiling. Their likes, dislikes, dreams. I've missed so much, but I'm grateful I have the chance now to catch up. The bell of a distant church clock chimed, reminding them that time was passing. They had been gone from the ICU for a while. Likely, Dante would be looking for them if he noticed their absence. Neither of them wanted to upset him on this day. Grant stood, still gently holding Ayana's hand, and helped her to her feet. Though their hearts were heavy with all that had been revealed, there was also a sense of catharsis between them. When Ayana stood, she found herself very close to Grant. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, both wounded and healing, two souls who had found their way back to understanding. Impulsively, Grant lifted a hand to Ayana's face, brushing his thumb across her cheek, where a tear had left a trail. "Thank you," he said softly, "for telling me everything, for raising our boys into fine young men, and for letting me back into your life, even if I don't deserve it." Ayana leaned into his hand ever so slightly, eyes closing at the warmth of his touch. "Everyone deserves a chance at forgiveness, Grant," she whispered. "We were both wronged, and we both wronged each other. But our sons, they're a second chance for us to do right. They're what matters most now." A gentle breeze stirred the garden, carrying the scent of blossoms around them. Grant felt an overwhelming tenderness towards Ayana. In that instant, he wished he could turn back time and prevent all her pain. Since he couldn't, he resolved silently to do everything in his power from this day forward to bring her happiness and support, whether as a friend, co-parent, or, dare he hope, something more. He slowly drew his hand away, aware that they were on fragile ground emotionally. "We should go back," he said quietly. "Omari might be waking up soon." "Yes," she replied, her voice steadier now, though her eyes were still luminous from tears. "Let's go." They walked back into the hospital side by side. For the first time in 19 years, they walked together in understanding rather than apart in anger. The truth had been unveiled, and while the wounds were still healing, a path toward forgiveness, and perhaps even reconciliation, was finally open. So the truth is finally out. Grant's jealousy, the misunderstanding about Marcus, his mother paying Ayana to disappear with the twins, 19 years of pain because no one communicated. If you're invested in finding out whether this family can truly heal, hit that like button right now. And subscribe, because the second half of this story is where everything comes together. You don't want to miss what happens next. Quick question for the comments. Team reconciliation or team move on? Can they really make it work after all this? Let me know below. Now let's see if Grant can win back not just Ayana's heart, but his son's trust. Over the next week, Omari's condition improved steadily. The doctors were pleased with his recovery, and it wasn't long before they were preparing to discharge him to continue healing at home. During that time, Grant became a constant presence in the hospital, arriving early each morning with fresh breakfast and coffee, and staying until late at night after Ayana and Dante went home to rest. In those quiet evenings by Omari's bedside, Grant often found himself holding his sleeping son's hand, marveling at how precious this young man was, and silently vowing to never again be absent from his children's lives. Dante's initial wariness towards Grant began to thaw as well, aided by Ayana gently telling him the truth about the past, that his father hadn't known of their existence, and that the separation was fueled by a tragic misunderstanding. One afternoon, Dante even mustered a shy thank you to Grant, while Omari dozed, acknowledging how his father's blood donation helped save his twin's life. It wasn't a full embrace, but it was a start. Grant accepted it with a warm smile and replied, "I'm just grateful I could help. I'd do anything for you both." Dante had nodded, clearly still sorting through complicated feelings, but the hostility in his eyes had dimmed. When the day came for Omari to leave the hospital, Grant made arrangements that surprised both Ayana and the boys. He arrived with a hired medical transport and a private nurse to assist Omari during the transition, and he gently proposed a plan. "My penthouse has plenty of space, and it's much closer to the hospital and to good physical therapists," he said, careful to make it sound like a practical matter. "I'd like you all to stay with me, at least until Omari is fully back on his feet. I can have a room set up for each of you, and any care Omari needs, I can provide." Ayana hesitated, glancing at her sons. She didn't want to inconvenience him or intrude on his life, but before she could protest, Omari spoke up in a weak but eager voice. "Can we, Mom? It might be easier, and I kinda want to see where Dad lives." He offered a small, hopeful smile. During his hospital stay, Omari had bonded quickly with Grant. The gentle, quiet conversations they shared when Ayana stepped out for coffee or when Dante napped had already begun to form a connection. Omari was endlessly curious about his father's world. Dante shrugged, trying to play it cool, but he didn't voice any objection. In truth, he too was curious, and after seeing Grant's devotion this past week, he was willing to give this arrangement a chance for Omari's sake. At their silence, Ayana gave a tentative nod. "All right," she conceded, meeting Grant's gaze. "But just until Omari recovers. I don't want to put you out." "You're not putting me out at all," Grant assured quickly. "It would make me very happy to have you all there." There was unmistakable relief and delight in his face. Within hours, the family found themselves at the doors of Grant's penthouse. When the elevator opened directly into the grand foyer, Ayana and the twins couldn't help but pause and take in the sight. The space was elegant and expansive, with polished marble floors and tasteful modern art adorning the walls. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Central Park. Sunlight flooded the living area, where plush couches and a grand piano in the corner added warmth to what could have been an impersonal space. "Whoa," Dante muttered under his breath, trying not to look too impressed, but failing as his eyes widened at the skyline view. Omari, leaning on a crutch and under the watchful eye of the nurse, let out a low whistle. "This place is amazing," he said, smiling at his father. Grant chuckled, a bit bashful. "I suppose it's home," he said. "I hope you'll be comfortable here." He led them inside. "Your rooms are down this hall." I put Dante and Omari in the 2 rooms adjacent to each other, and Ayana, you're in the guest suite just across. All have their own bathrooms. If you need anything at all, just ask. My housekeeper Elena will be here in the mornings to help as well." As Grant guided them, Ayana was quietly observing the details of his home. She noticed on a side table the familiar framed photograph of their younger selves, the same one he had kept hidden in his desk. It was now prominently displayed, as if he no longer wished to hide that part of his life. The sight made her heart flutter. "You kept that?" she asked softly, stopping by the table. Dante and Omari looked curiously at the photo as well. Grant paused, a touch of pink coloring his cheeks. "I did," he said. "It's one of my favorite memories." He looked at the boys. "That was taken not long after your mom and I got married. We were at a fair in her hometown, eating ice cream. I think she just told a joke at my expense, which is why we were laughing." Ayana laughed lightly, recalling the moment. "You dropped your ice cream on your shoes," she added for the boys' benefit, a playful glint in her eye. "He was trying to impress me and got all flustered." Grant rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly as the twins chuckled. "Your mother has always been the only one able to make me lose my cool," he confessed, smiling at Ayana in a way that made her stomach do a little flip. They continued the tour. Dante's room was spacious, with a view of the city skyline. Omari's room overlooked the park, which he loved instantly. Ayana's guest suite was comfortable and private. She couldn't help but notice that Grant had placed small, thoughtful touches in each room. A vase of her favorite lilies on her nightstand, and for the boys, framed posters of things they liked. Dante was astonished to see a vintage New York Knicks poster on his wall. He was a big basketball fan, and Omari found a model of a classic car on his desk, the same one he had been reading about on his laptop in the hospital. Grant, it seemed, had been listening keenly and wasted no time in trying to make them feel at home. That first evening at the penthouse, Elena the housekeeper prepared a hearty dinner with Grant. His guidance. He had insisted on her cooking all of the family's favorite comfort foods. They gathered around the long dining table that had for years seated only one. The twins marveled at the spread: crispy fried chicken, macaroni and cheese, collard greens, and cornbread, recipes Ayana remembered mentioning to Grant ages ago as her favorites from childhood. For dessert, there was a homemade apple pie, recalling one of Grant's own favorites his grandmother used to make. The meal was a blending of their histories, and it filled the home with a warmth and delicious aroma it hadn't known in years. As they ate, conversation flowed more easily than expected. Omari and Dante started sharing funny stories from their childhood, like the time they tried to bake a cake for Ayana on Mother's Day and nearly set the kitchen on fire, or when they both secretly skipped school to go to a comic book convention and got caught. Ayana rolled her eyes affectionately at these revelations, playfully scolding. "I knew something was off about that so-called flu you both had that day." Grant listened to every story with rapt attention, laughing along and occasionally asking questions. He was learning his son's personalities. Omari was indeed the tinkerer. He excitedly told Grant about a robotics project he was working on in college. Dante, on the other hand, had a creative streak. He spoke about his love for music and how he played the guitar in a small band with friends. Upon hearing that, Grant's eyes lit up, and he led them to the living room after dinner. He opened the glossy lid of the grand piano by the window. "I remember you used to sing, Ayana," Grant said with a gentle smile. He ran his fingers over the keys, playing a soft chord. "We haven't done that in years, but maybe we could have some music now. Dante, would you like to play something with me? I have a guitar somewhere, if you play." Dante looked surprised that his father had a guitar, but Grant quickly fetched an acoustic guitar from a hall closet. "I bought this years ago, thinking I'd learn," he chuckled, handing it to Dante. "I never quite had the time. Maybe you can show me a thing or two." Dante took the guitar carefully, a spark of enthusiasm in his eyes. He strummed a few chords, tuning it. "Sure. Do you know Lean on Me?" he asked, naming the classic song by Bill Withers. Grant nodded and began to play the melody on the piano. Ayana watched from the sofa, her heart swelling as her once estranged family created music together in the golden glow of the lamps. Omari tapped his foot from his spot beside his mother, while Elena quietly cleared dishes in the background with a smile on her face. Dante's guitar joined Grant's piano, and then Ayana, unable to resist, began to sing softly. Her voice was a bit rusty at first, but soon its soulful warmth filled the room. One by one, the men joined in, Grant humming along as he played, Omari chiming in quietly on the chorus. By the time they reached the final refrain, they were all smiling. The song faded out gently, and there was a peaceful silence before Dante let out a joyous laugh. "Mom, I didn't know you could sing like that." Ayana shrugged, laughing as well. "Your dad used to say I'd missed my calling on the stage," she said, glancing at Grant. He met her eyes with a fond expression. "That voice got me through many a tough day," Grant said softly. "Thank you for sharing it tonight." The evening was perhaps the happiest Grant had been in decades. They felt like a family, a real family, even if so much time had been lost. The twins, exhausted from the excitement and Omari still recuperating, headed to bed early. Omari needed his rest, and Dante offered to help him settle in. After wishing their parents good night, Dante mumbled the words a bit awkwardly, but he did say good night directly to Grant, which made Grant beam. The boys left the living room. Ayana and Grant found themselves alone on the couch, the quiet hum of the city night beyond the windows. The closeness of the moment wasn't lost on either of them. Ayana leaned back, looking around the penthouse. "I have to admit," she said, "this feels very surreal. A week ago, I would never have imagined we'd all be here like this." "I know," Grant murmured. "Surreal, but wonderful." He hesitated before continuing. "How are you holding up, truly? This must be so much for you." suddenly sharing space with me again. After all these years, Ayana gave him a small, reassuring smile. It's been a lot to process, but seeing you with the boys, it's healing something in me I didn't even realize was still broken. She looked down at her hands. For so long, I carried the burden of thinking I had to be everything for them. Allowing you into their lives, watching how you care for them, it's shown me I'm not alone anymore, and that I don't have to be. Grant felt a swell of emotion. He reached over and gently covered her hand with his. You're not alone, he affirmed. Not ever again if I have any say. I'm here for you, for them, for whatever you need. They sat in a comfortable silence for a moment, the air between them filled with things unspoken yet understood. Ayana glanced at the piano, then back at Grant. You know, she said softly, I remember how you used to play that piano when you were trying to solve a difficult problem. You'd play and play until you worked it out in your head. Grant chuckled. I'm surprised you remember that. Of course I do, she said, her eyes distant with memory. I remember so many little things, like how you take your coffee black but with a spoonful of honey, or how you'd tuck a book under your pillow because you like to read to fall asleep. Strange. The details that stick with you. Grant's smile grew. I can't believe you recall those things. He shifted a bit closer, turning toward her. I remember that you always had to sleep with the radio on low because complete silence made you restless, and that you can't resist caramel popcorn. You'd eat the whole bag. Ayana laughed quietly. I haven't changed much then. They shared a lingering look, filled with nostalgia and a renewed affection. Grant's heart pounded. So many times he had dreamed of simply sitting with her like this again. Talking quietly after the boys, our boys, he corrected himself happily, had gone to bed. Just then, the private elevator pinged, indicating someone was coming up. Grant frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone at this hour. The elevator doors slid open, revealing an elegant older woman dressed in a tailored navy suit and pearls. Her hair was iron grey, swept up in an impeccable chignon, and her expression was sharp as a hawk's. It was Margaret Wellington, Grant's mother. Ayana stiffened instinctively upon seeing her former mother-in-law. The older woman stepped out into the foyer, eyes immediately zeroing in on Grant and Ayana sitting together. Disapproval etched deep lines in her face. Grant, Margaret said by way of greeting, her tone cool. I heard some unbelievable news and had to see for myself. Her gaze flickered to Ayana with thinly veiled disdain. I see the prodigal daughter-in-law has returned. Grant stood up at once, positioning himself subtly in front of Ayana, as if to shield her from his mother's barbed words. Mother, this is not a good time, he said in a firm voice. You can't just barge in here. Margaret's eyes narrowed. I'm still your mother, and this is still the family property. I will barge in if I feel it necessary. Her attention shifted to Ayana again, and she gave a tight, insincere smile. Ayana, it's been a long time. Ayana rose now as well, taking a calm breath. She refused to be intimidated in front of her children or Grant. It has, Mrs. Wellington. Surprised to see me? The older woman arched an eyebrow. You shouldn't be. After all, you're staying in my son's home again. Before Ayana could respond, Grant interjected sternly, Mother, don't. We're not doing this. Margaret lifted a hand. I will speak my piece. I think I have that right as the matriarch of this family. She looked between Grant and Ayana with thinly veiled anger. How convenient that after all these years, you show up with not one but two heirs to the Wellington fortune. Ayana. Twins, I'm told. Was it your plan all? Along to secure your place by having Grant's children in secret? You took a generous settlement and disappeared per our agreement. And now here you are to... That's enough. Grant's voice echoed through the living room. At the raised voices, Dante had appeared at the hallway entrance, drawn by the commotion. He stood there with eyes wide, clearly having overheard his grandmother's accusation. Omari, slower moving, was just behind him, leaning on his crutch. Both boys looked stunned by the scene unfolding. Dad, Dante said uncertainly, glancing from his grandmother to his father. Grant immediately went to his sons, his posture protective. He gently placed a hand on each of their shoulders. "It's all right, boys. My mother was just leaving," he said, casting a hard look at Margaret. Margaret's face softened slightly when she finally took in the sight of the twins. In spite of herself, she was clearly curious about her newfound grandsons. "So, these are them?" she asked, taking a few steps forward. "Dante and Omari, I presume." The twins stayed at their father's side. Dante's jaw clenched. He had caught the implication in his grandmother's words about an agreement and him being an heir. Omari looked more confused than anything, not yet knowing who this stranger was. Grant nodded tersely. "Yes, these are my sons, and you will treat them with respect." Margaret put on a strained smile. "Of course. I'm simply overwhelmed. I never imagined I'd discover I have grandsons this way." She peered at them. "They certainly have the Wellington look." Her comment was odd, given the boys were clearly mixed race. Perhaps she referred to some feature, Grant's eyes, or the shape of their noses. But Dante bristled, hearing a subtle undertone. Ayana stepped forward then, moving beside the boys. Her voice was measured but firm. "Mrs. Wellington, I understand this is a shock, but I will not allow you to insult me or insinuate things in front of my children." Margaret's eyes flashed. "Your children? As far as society is concerned, my dear, they are Wellingtons. This is a matter of family blood." She looked to Grant. "Why wasn't I told about this immediately? Were you ever going to inform me that our lineage had been continued?" Grant felt Dante tense under his hand, and he noticed Omari shrinking back slightly, unsettled. Fury boiled inside him at his mother's tactless focus on lineage and heirs, rather than the human reality of two grandsons who'd nearly lost their life. He stepped forward, placing himself squarely between his mother and his family. "Mother, these boys are not just heirs or some extension of the Wellington name. They're my sons, your grandsons, and they've had to grow up without a father because of mistakes we made." He emphasized the "we" pointedly. Margaret stiffened. "I acted in this family's best interest. And look where it got us. Deceit and scandal. You had an agreement with me, Ayana. You weren't to bother my son again." Dante found his voice at that, anger lacing it. "Grandma, with all due respect, you're wrong," he snapped, surprising Margaret with the word grandma. He hadn't intended to call her that, but he did. "My mom never wanted anything from you or Dad. She raised us on her own. We're here because my brother was hurt, not because we're after your precious fortune." Omari added quietly, "We didn't even know Dad until a week ago, so don't blame our mom." His tone was polite but firm, a mirror of his mother's protective stance. Margaret appraised her grandsons and gave a thin, mirthless smile. "Feisty, aren't they? Already taking up for their mother. How quaint." She looked at Grant almost pityingly. "These boys should have been brought up in our world, Grant, given the best of everything and taught how to carry on our family legacy. Instead, they've been raised by a loving mother who did an incredible job." Grant interrupted sharply. "They are smart, kind, and strong young men, and I couldn't be prouder of them. And make no mistake, Mother, they will carry our family legacy forward in their own way, on their own terms, not yours." Margaret's eyes flashed with anger at being spoken to in such a manner by her son. "I see she's turned you completely against your own family values," she said bitterly. "This is exactly what I feared when you married her, and I was right. She has no respect for our traditions." "That's enough." Grant's voice thundered. The twins and Ayana fell silent, and even Margaret paused. In all his life, Grant had rarely raised his voice to his mother. But now he was livid. "The only mistake made here was mine. I didn't stand up to you years ago. I allowed your prejudice and your obsession with family image to poison my happiness. That ends today." He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "If you cannot accept Ayana and my sons as my family, with full respect and love, then you will not be a part of our lives. I'm done choosing your approval over the people I love." Margaret's face went white with shock. "Grant, you don't mean that. I'm your mother. Everything I did for you." "No," Grant said coldly. You did it for yourself, for the family name, and in doing so, you broke apart our family." He reached back and took Ayana's hand firmly in his, and with his other arm he put a protective hold around Dante's shoulders, also gently nudging Omari closer once he'd set aside his crutch. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. He was physically standing with them against his mother. "This is my family. Ayana, Dante, and Omari. We are the Wellingtons, whether you approve or not, and I won't allow you or anyone to mistreat them." Ayana looked at Grant with shining eyes at those words, squeezing his hand. Dante and Omari were watching their father in awe, seeing a side of him they'd never known, a man who would defend them and their mother with fierce loyalty. Margaret's expression was a mix of outrage and hurt pride. Her gaze flickered to the twins and to Ayana, and perhaps she saw that she had truly lost. The unity between Grant and his own new family was unbreakable now. With an indignant huff, she drew herself up. "I will not be spoken to this way," she declared. "If you choose them over your own mother, then I have nothing more to say. But don't expect me to watch quietly as you tarnish everything your father and I built." Grant felt a pang, but he held firm. "Goodbye, mother," he said quietly. "Please see yourself out." Margaret opened her mouth as if to retort, but the steely resolve in her son's face made her think twice. She cast one more withering glance at Ayana, who met it calmly, chin raised, then turned on her heel and strode back into the elevator. The doors closed on her stern face, and she was gone. The silence she left in her wake was heavy. Grant exhaled, not realizing he'd been holding his breath. His heart was pounding with adrenaline and emotion, sadness that it had come to that confrontation, but also immense relief, and pride that he had finally done what he should have done long ago: stand up for the woman he loved and their children. Dante was the first to break the silence. He stepped in front of his father, looking up at him with an expression that had lost all its earlier hardness. In its place was a kind of respect and gratitude. "Dad," he said quietly, the word coming more naturally now, "thank you for doing that. For us. I know she's your mom, but she was wrong." Grant looked at his son. It was the first time Dante had called him Dad so sincerely. Emotion swelled in his chest. He placed both hands on Dante's shoulders and then, unable to help himself, pulled his son into a hug. Dante stiffened for a split second out of surprise, then relaxed, tentatively returning the embrace. It was their first real hug, and it spoke volumes. "She is my mom," Grant said softly over Dante's shoulder. "But you are my son. You and your brother and your mom. You're my family now, and nothing matters more to me than that." By now, Omari had hobbled over as well. Grant gently released Dante and immediately drew Omari into a careful hug, mindful of his healing injuries. Omari hugged back, closing his eyes. "Love you, Dad," Omari murmured, the words muffled against Grant's chest. Grant had to blink back tears. He'd never imagined hearing those words, and certainly not so soon. "I love you, Omari. I love you, Dante," he said, looking at both twins with deep affection. "More than I can ever say." The boys stepped back after a moment. Ayana stood to the side, one hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming freely down her face. Seeing Grant defend them so unequivocally, and hearing him claim their family with such devotion, had touched her to the core. It was something she had once only dreamed he would do. Now, here he was, the man she always knew he could be, finally unshackled from others' expectations. Grant turned to Ayana, gently wiping a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "Are you all right?" he asked tenderly. She let out a shaky laugh. "I am just overwhelmed, in a good way." She looked into his eyes, her own filled with love. "You have no idea how much what you just did means to me." Grant stepped closer, placing his hands on her waist. "I think I have some idea," he whispered. "I should have done it years ago. I'm sorry I didn't protect you back then, but I promise I will never let you down again." Ayana shook her head, resting her palms on his chest. "You made it clear now. That's what matters. Seeing you defend us." It healed something in Dante, I could tell. And in me, she looked up at him through her tears, love and admiration shining in her eyes. The man you were just now, that's the man I fell in love with all those years ago. The one who isn't afraid to love me despite what anyone says. I'm so proud of you, Grant. A relieved, joyous smile spread across Grant's face. I'll spend every day trying to live up to that, Ayanna. I promise. He brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, his fingers lingering against her smooth skin. They were so close now that he could feel her breath. The years apart, the longing, the tension of the night, all coalesced into this singular moment. Grant's voice was a gentle rumble. I love you, Ayanna, he confessed, his blue eyes misting. I never stopped. I think you know that now. Ayanna's heart soared hearing those words spoken aloud. She had sensed it, felt it in his actions. But to hear it, it melted away any remaining walls around her heart. And I love you, Grant, she whispered back. I tried to stop, tried to hate you, but my heart wouldn't let go. You've always held a piece of it. With a soft, relieved laugh that was almost a sob, Grant lowered his face to hers. Their lips met in a tender kiss, hesitant for just an instant, as if both were, remembering the taste, and then deepening with years of pent-up emotion. Ayanna's arms wound around his neck as she returned his kiss with equal fervor. It was a kiss of reconciliation, of passion, of promises renewed under the quiet New York sky beyond the windows. They finally parted, foreheads resting together. Both were breathless and smiling like they hadn't in years. Grant tightened his embrace around her, as if assuring himself that she was real and here to stay. You have no idea how long I've wanted to do that again, he murmured. Ayanna laughed softly, her fingers playing with the hair at the nape of his neck. Probably as long as I have. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, then the tip of her nose, making her giggle. Let's not waste any more time then, he said quietly. We've lost enough. I want us to be a family, a real family. I know I have to earn that, and I will. But I don't want to spend another day without you by my side. Ayanna felt tears of happiness in her eyes. You don't have to. We're here now. We'll figure it out together, one day at a time. Hand in hand, they retreated to the living room to talk late into the night, discussing hopes for the future, how to support their sons, and sharing gentle kisses on the couch, like no time had passed at all. Outside, the city lights of New York City blazed on, but inside that penthouse, a once broken family was healing, and a love long thought lost was rekindled stronger than ever. In the weeks that followed, the changes in the Wellington household were nothing short of remarkable. What had once been a cold, empty penthouse became a true home filled with laughter, love, and the lively energy of family. Omari recovered well under the care of his parents, a word that still filled him and Dante with a warm glow. Both boys had quickly grown comfortable addressing Grant as Dad, and each time they did, Grant's heart swelled with joy. One sunny afternoon, about a month after the dramatic events, the family found themselves in Central Park, not far from the penthouse. Omari was walking with just a cane now, regaining strength every day. Dante dribbled a basketball as they strolled, challenging his brother to a game once he was fully healed. Ayanna laughed as Grant attempted to spin the ball on one finger and failed miserably, the ball bouncing off in a wild direction. Some things never change, she teased him. Coordination still isn't your strong suit. Grant feigned a wounded look, then swept her into a playful dance right there on the grass. He twirled her around to unheard music, while the boys groaned in mock embarrassment. Secretly delighted to see their parents so happy and in love, the spring air was filled with their laughter. They laid out a picnic blanket and settled down to eat sandwiches and fruit. As they ate, they talked about the future. Dante had been accepted into a prestigious music program at a university in the city, and Omari planned to return to his engineering classes in the fall. Grant had already insisted on paying their tuition, a point Dante initially resisted until Grant convinced him it was a father's joy and duty to support his children's education. I've got a lot of birthdays and holidays to make up for, Grant joked, ruffling Dante's hair, to which Dante protested but with a grin. Let me spoil you a little, Omari smirked. Just a little, Dad. We don't want to get too spoiled. Ayanna watched her three men banter, her heart content. She caught Grant's eye, and they exchanged a smile full of understanding. They had been given a second chance, something rare and precious, and neither intended to waste it. As the afternoon sun cast golden hues over the park, Grant produced something from his pocket. "I have something for you, Ayana," he said, somewhat shyly. Dante and Omari immediately quieted, sensing something important. In Grant's palm lay a velvet ring box. Ayana's eyes widened, a hand flying to her chest. Grant opened the box to reveal an elegant ring with a sapphire stone flanked by 2 diamonds, the same ring he had given her when he first proposed over 20 years ago, now restored and shining. "I kept it," he said softly. "I always hoped, maybe someday." He took a breath and knelt on one knee before her, right there on the picnic blanket. "Ayana, my love, I let you go once, and it was the worst mistake of my life. Will you marry me again? Will you allow me the honor of being your husband, by your side for the rest of our days, this time with no secrets and no regrets? I promise to cherish and protect you and our family with all that I am." Tears glistened in Ayana's eyes as she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Dante and Omari held their breaths, beaming. Finally, Ayana found her voice, clear and full of emotion. "Yes, Grant. Of course, yes," she exclaimed. A whoop of joy went up from the twins as Grant slipped the ring onto her finger, its rightful place. Grant stood and kissed Ayana sweetly to the sound of his sons clapping and cheering. It was a gentle kiss, full of hope and affirmation of the life they were building anew. Dante nudged Omari, grinning. "Looks like we'll need to get our tuxes ready again," he quipped. Omari laughed. "Round 2 of the wedding that we missed the first time," he then added with a playful smirk toward his father. "Dad, just so you know, Dante and I get veto power on the cake flavor." "Deal," Grant laughed, pulling both his sons into a hug with his free arm while still holding Ayana's hand with the other. It struck him at that moment. He was embracing his whole world. Ayana, at his side, his sons close, all healthy and smiling. Nothing else mattered. As the family stood there together in Central Park, they knew the road ahead wouldn't be without challenges. There would be new memories to make, old wounds that might twinge now and then, and the complexities of blending their lives after so much time apart. But they had what they needed to face it: love, forgiveness, and each other. In that present-day sunlit moment, Grant looked around at his wife-to-be and their 2 sons and felt an overwhelming gratitude. 19 years of regret had led to an unexpected reunion and a miraculous second chance. From the pain of the past, they had forged a stronger, wiser love and a family united by bonds that no misunderstanding could ever break again. Ayana rested her head on Grant's shoulder as the twins launched into a debate about wedding music. Grant wrapped an arm around her, exhaling contentedly. Life had indeed given them a dramatic, emotional slow burn of a journey with twists and heartbreak, but it had also delivered redemption in the end. They had learned that communication and trust were as vital as air, that love could endure the worst of storms, and that it was never too late to make things right. As the 4 Wellingtons strolled out of the park that day, they truly felt they were walking into a new beginning, one filled with hope, love, and the promise of a happier tomorrow, together. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and share it with someone who believes in second chances. And if you're not already subscribed, join our family by hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell. We post powerful stories about love, redemption, and the strength of the human spirit every single day. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Grant and Ayana's relationship can truly work this time around? Will Dante fully forgive his father, or will there always be some resentment? And what do you think should happen with Margaret? Does she deserve a place in their lives? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I love reading your perspectives, and your comments help these stories reach more people who need to hear them. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, it's never too late to make things right with the people you love. I'll see you in the next story. Take care.